Have you ever judged someone based on appearances, only to discover how wrong you were? Today's story will show you why kindness should always come first, no matter what someone looks like or what they own. If this message resonates with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to see more life-changing stories like this one. Emma Chen stood in the crowded coffee shop, her designer handbag dangling from her wrist as she tapped her manicured nails impatiently against the counter. The line was moving painfully slow, and she was already running late for her marketing director interview at Billionaire Enterprises. This interview could change everything for her. A prestigious position at one of the city's fastest-growing companies would finally validate all her hard work and the expensive MBA she was still paying off. Next, the barista called, and Emma stepped forward, ordering her usual complicated latte with precise specifications. As she waited for her drink, she noticed a man in worn jeans and a faded hoodie struggling to count change at the register. His dark hair was slightly unkempt, and his sneakers had definitely seen better days. "I'm sorry," he said quietly to the barista, "I think I'm short by about 50 cents. The barista's face fell with sympathy, but before she could respond, Emma let out an exaggerated sigh that turned several heads. "Seriously? If you can't afford coffee, maybe you shouldn't be in line wasting everyone's time," she said loudly, checking her watch. "Some of us have actual important places to be." The coffee shop fell silent. The man turned to look at her, his deep brown eyes meeting hers without anger, just a quiet dignity that made something uncomfortable stir in Emma's chest. Without a word, he stepped aside, allowing the next customer to order. "Emma Chen," the barista called, sliding her drink across the counter. Emma grabbed her coffee and hurried out, the uncomfortable feeling fading as she focused on her upcoming interview. She had worked too hard to let anything distract her now. Billionaire Enterprises occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming skyscraper downtown. Emma arrived 15 minutes early, smoothing her pencil skirt as she sat in the reception area. The walls were adorned with awards and photographs of the company's founder, Daniel Park, though she noticed most were taken from a distance or at angles that obscured his full face, a notorious recluse despite his success. "Ms. Chen? They're ready for you," the receptionist said with a smile. Emma was led into a conference room where 3 people sat waiting. 2 introduced themselves as HR directors, but the third person, sitting at the head of the table with his back to her as he looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows, remained silent. "Thank you for joining us today," one of the HR directors began. "Before we start, our CEO wanted to sit in on this interview personally." The chair swiveled around, and Emma's heart stopped. Sitting there, now dressed in an impeccable suit but with the same deep brown eyes that had looked at her in the coffee shop, was the man she had humiliated just an hour ago. "Hello again, Ms. Chen," Daniel Park said calmly. "Shall we begin?" Emma's face burned with shame as recognition dawned. The billionaire founder of Billionaire Enterprises, the man whose approval she desperately needed, was the same person she had publicly belittled over 50 cents. The interview proceeded professionally, with Daniel asking insightful questions about her experience and vision for the company's marketing strategy. Emma answered each question thoroughly, trying to focus despite her mortification, but she could feel her dream job slipping away with each passing minute. When the interview concluded, Daniel stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Chen. We'll be in touch." Emma nodded, unable to meet his eyes. As she turned to leave, something compelled her to stop at the door. "Mr. Park," she said, turning back. "I owe you an apology for my behavior this morning. It was inexcusable, and I'm deeply ashamed." Daniel studied her for a moment. "Why did you say those things?" The question caught her off guard. She could have made excuses, the stress, her tight schedule, but something about his direct gaze made her answer honestly. "Because I judged you based on your appearance," she admitted. "And because I thought I was more important than you. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Chen. That will be all." Emma left the building certain she had destroyed her chances. She walked aimlessly through the city park, replaying the morning's events in her mind. How could she have been so callous? So judgmental? The man she had humiliated controlled $1 billion empire, but that wasn't even the point. She would have been just as wrong if he had truly been unable to afford that coffee. 3 days later, Emma received an email from Luminary Enterprises. With trembling hands, she opened it, expecting a polite rejection. Instead, it requested her presence for a second interview, this time, a one-on-one meeting with Daniel Park himself. When she arrived, she was escorted directly to his office on the top floor. Daniel was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Ms. Chen," he said, turning to greet her. "Please, have a seat." Emma sat across from him, hands folded in her lap to hide their slight tremor. "I've reviewed your resume extensively," Daniel began. "Your qualifications are impressive. Top of your class at business school, innovative campaigns at your previous positions, glowing recommendations." "Thank you," Emma said quietly. "But I didn't ask you back to discuss your resume," he continued. "I wanted to tell you a story." Daniel leaned back in his chair. 10 years ago, I was working 3 jobs in coding in my spare time to build what would become Luminary's first product. I couldn't afford much, certainly not fancy coffee. One morning, I was 50 cents short at a different coffee shop, and the woman behind me not only paid for my drink but sat down and asked about what I was working on. She became Luminary's first investor with a $5,000 check, money she had saved for a vacation. That investment is worth over $20 million today. Emma listened, transfixed. The difference between success and failure often comes down to one person showing kindness when they have no obligation to do so, Daniel said. Your technical skills are excellent, Ms. Chen, but I need to know what kind of person you are. The woman you were in that coffee shop, is that who you really are? Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. No, she said firmly. That's not who I want to be. I've been so focused on proving myself that I forgot to be human along the way. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. We all make mistakes, Ms. Chen. The question is whether we learn from them. To Emma's surprise, Daniel offered her the position, with one condition: she would also lead the company's new community outreach program, working directly with local shelters and education initiatives for underprivileged youth. I believe people deserve second chances, he told her. But they also need to earn them. Emma accepted immediately, understanding this was both an opportunity and a challenge to become a better person. Her first day at Luminary was spent not in marketing meetings but at a local shelter, serving coffee to people who couldn't afford it. As she handed a cup to an elderly man with worn clothes but kind eyes, she remembered her encounter with Daniel and smiled warmly. Cream and sugar, she asked. Just black, thank you, the man replied. Trying to save money where I can. Emma nodded. The next one's on me, she said quietly. Over the following months, Emma excelled in both her marketing role and her community work. She discovered that the connections she made through volunteering often led to innovative marketing ideas that resonated more authentically with consumers. Luminary's brand began to shift, becoming known not just for cutting-edge technology but for its social conscience. Daniel observed her transformation with quiet approval. 6 months after hiring her, he invited Emma to join him for coffee at the same shop where they had first encountered each other. You know, he said as they sat down with their drinks, I almost didn't come to your interview that day. Why did you? Emma asked. Daniel smiled slightly. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe I wanted to see if you would recognize me and what you would do. I'm glad you did, Emma said sincerely. It changed everything for me. Not just for you, Daniel replied. Your community initiative has become a core part of our company identity. The board is impressed. Emma felt a warmth that had nothing to do with her coffee. It's the most fulfilling work I've ever done. As they continued their conversation, the barista who had witnessed their first encounter approached their table with a smile. Your usual, she asked Daniel. Please, he nodded. And whatever she's having, he added, gesturing to Emma. Oh, I can get my own, Emma started to say. Daniel shook his head. Consider it coming full circle. Later that evening, Emma walked through the city park, reflecting on how much had changed. Her phone buzzed with a notification: Luminary stock had jumped 10% after announcing their expanded community program. She smiled, remembering how she had once measured success only in numbers and status. A young woman sat on a nearby bench, frantically trying to gather scattered papers that had blown from her folder. Emma immediately went to help, kneeling to collect pages of what appeared to be a resume and portfolio. "Interview materials?" Emma asked, handing the stack back. The woman nodded, looking stressed. "For Luminary Enterprises, actually. I'm probably not qualified, but I had to try." Emma smiled. "I work there. Want some advice?" The relief on the woman's face was immediate. "Yes, please. I'm so nervous." "Be yourself," Emma said simply. "The technical skills matter, but who you are matters more." As Emma helped the woman prepare for her interview, she realized that the most valuable lesson Daniel had taught her wasn't about marketing strategy or business acumen, it was about the ripple effect of how we treat others, especially when we think no one important is watching. 1 year to the day after her coffee shop encounter with Daniel, Emma was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer. At the company-wide announcement, Daniel shared the story of their first meeting, drawing laughter and then thoughtful silence from the assembled employees. "Emma reminded me of an essential truth," he concluded. "We are not defined by our worst moments, but by how we grow from them. And sometimes, the people we dismiss might be the very ones who change our lives." Emma's journey from arrogance to humility had transformed not just her career but her entire perspective on success. The woman who had once judged a billionaire for being 50 cents short now understood that true wealth had nothing to do with money. As she stood beside Daniel, accepting congratulations from her colleagues, she caught sight of the young woman she had helped in the park, now a junior designer in the creative department, beaming with pride. Full circle, Emma whispered to herself, remembering Daniel's words. That evening, as Emma left the office, she passed a homeless man asking for spare change outside the building. Without hesitation, she stopped to talk with him, learning his name was Michael and that he had once been a software engineer before mental health issues derailed his career. "I know someone who might be able to help," she told him, thinking of Luminary's employment program for people rebuilding their lives. The next morning, Emma arrived at work to find Daniel waiting by her office. "I saw you with Michael yesterday," he said. "He's starting in our IT support training program next week." Emma smiled. "Everyone deserves a chance to show who they really are." Daniel nodded. "That's exactly why I hired you." As they walked together toward the conference room for the morning meeting, Emma realized that her greatest accomplishment wasn't her title or salary, it was learning that the measure of a person isn't in what they have, but in how they treat others when they think no one is looking. And sometimes, the person you're dismissing might just be a billionaire in disguise, or more importantly, someone whose life you could change with a simple act of kindness. As the seasons changed, Luminary Enterprises continued to flourish under Daniel's vision and Emma's innovative marketing strategies. Their community initiatives had expanded to 5 cities, and a documentary about their corporate social responsibility program had recently won acclaim at an independent film festival. On a crisp autumn morning, Emma arrived at work to find an unexpected visitor waiting in her office, a slender woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, setting down her coffee. "You already have," the woman replied, extending her hand. "I'm Margaret Wilson. Daniel suggested I come meet you." The name clicked immediately. "You're the investor, the one who bought Daniel's coffee and invested in Luminary when it was just an idea." Margaret nodded, her eyes twinkling. "The very same. Though I prefer to think of myself as the lucky woman who recognized potential when others didn't." Emma gestured for Margaret to sit. "Daniel tells that story often. You changed his life." "Perhaps," Margaret said thoughtfully. "Or perhaps I just didn't stand in the way of what was already meant to be. Daniel would have succeeded with or without my $5,000. "I'm not so sure," Emma replied. "Sometimes all we need is one person who believes in us." Margaret studied Emma with interest. "Daniel tells me you've had your own journey with him. Something about a coffee shop?" Emma felt her cheeks warm at the memory, but she no longer carried the shame of that encounter, only the lessons. "I judged him when I shouldn't have. He taught me to see people, not appearances." "And now you're teaching others," Margaret observed. "That's why I'm here, actually." I've started a foundation to provide microloans to entrepreneurs who might not qualify for traditional funding. Daniel thought you might help us develop a mentorship component. As they discussed the possibilities, Emma realized how perfectly this aligned with her own evolving philosophy. By the time Margaret left, they had outlined a program that would pair established business leaders with struggling entrepreneurs, not just offering money, but guidance and connections. That evening, Emma stayed late at the office, finalizing the quarterly marketing report. As she gathered her things to leave, she noticed Daniel standing in her doorway. "Margaret liked you," he said simply. Emma smiled. "She's remarkable. I can see why you never forgot her kindness." Daniel nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "There's something I never told you about that day in the coffee shop." "What's that?" Emma asked, curious. "I wasn't actually short on money," he admitted. "I had plenty of cash in my wallet." Emma's brow furrowed in confusion. "Then why?" "It's something I do occasionally," Daniel explained. "A personal test. I pretend to be short on money in small establishments and see how people react. It tells me more about a community than any market research ever could." "And I failed spectacularly," Emma said, shaking her head with a rueful smile. "Initially, yes," Daniel agreed. "But you know what impressed me more than if you'd simply paid for my coffee? The fact that you recognized your mistake and owned it without excuses. That's much rarer than basic kindness." He stepped into her office and placed a small box on her desk. "This is for you." Emma opened it to find a simple silver keychain with a coffee cup charm. "To remind you," Daniel said quietly, "that our lowest moments don't define us, they refine us." As Emma drove home that night, the keychain sitting on her passenger seat caught the streetlights, glinting like a tiny beacon. She thought about how a single moment of unkindness had led her to a path of greater compassion, and how Daniel's decision to give her a second chance had created ripples that now extended far beyond just the two of them. At a red light, she noticed a young woman at a bus stop, shivering without a proper coat as rain began to fall. Without hesitation, Emma pulled over, rolled down her window, and offered the woman a ride. "Are you sure?" the woman asked hesitantly. "I live pretty far out." "I'm sure," Emma replied with a warm smile. Sometimes we all need someone to see us when we feel invisible. As they drove through the rain-slick streets, Emma learned the woman was a nursing student working 2 jobs to pay for school. By the time they reached her apartment, Emma had connected her with Luminary's scholarship program for healthcare workers. That night, as Emma drifted off to sleep, she realized that the true measure of her growth wasn't in her title or achievements, but in these small moments, the reflexive kindness that had replaced her former judgment, and the understanding that every person's story runs deeper than what we can see on the surface. And somewhere across the city, Daniel Park stood at his penthouse window, looking out at the lights below, thinking about how sometimes our greatest mistakes lead us exactly where we need to be. If this story touched your heart, remember to like and subscribe for more content that reminds us of the power of second chances and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. After all, you never know who might be watching or how your actions today might come back to shape your tomorrow.